Hi, so in this video I'd like to introduce work sessions in RHINO. The premise of this demo is an architectural competition to redesign a pavilion in Lower Manhattan. Some views of this competition site can be found here on the website, where we can see that there's a triangular wedge in between, on the border between Chinatown and Little Italy. And so this triangular site would be the project location, and the idea being that maybe you have a team of designers working on the project, one person potentially working on studies for proposals for the actual pavilion, and maybe another set of team members working on the existing context. And these things can happen simultaneously. The benefit of work sessions is that everybody can see the current state of the project by referencing in their RHINO files. So work sessions per the help file are defined as a way to manage a set of RHINO models that are being imported and used as reference geometry. So let's take a look at the files that we'll work with. I have three files created. One is a file with a potential project proposal, the pavilion design. This is not our design, it's really just a placeholder one for the demo. Another file is of the immediate context, and a third file would be all of Lower Manhattan, which is a substantially larger, bigger, heavier file, which you really don't want to have live in your active RHINO file just because it'll make it really big. But the benefit of work sessions is they can be brought in as needed. So what I have open currently in one file is a pavilion design. In another separate RHINO file is the immediate context. And so really two team members might be working simultaneously, one on the design of the pavilion, the other of the immediate context. And through the use of work sessions, one team member can reference in the other person's file. So we'll do this by typing in work session, going to attach, and selecting that file. In this case, this one is the context of the immediate area, and you can see that this has been brought in, and this file is locked, and the active file has a little check mark next to it. And you can see that any reference geometry is brought in, and those layers are grayed out, but you can still control the visibility just as you normally would through the layer manager. So let's take another look at how to offload, attach, and detach reference files. So I can select it and click detach, and you can see that that gets offloaded. So it's quite helpful to bring in somebody else's work and be able to reference it, but not have it live entirely in your current file. Let me go back and do this again. So here the file is being, is acting as a kind of underlay. Let's switch to team member, the other team member who might be working on the existing context, maybe adding windows, canopies, and the like. I'm going to try to demonstrate, some changes to this file and how those would be reflected back into the work session file. So here I've added a few more canopies to this context. I'll click Save. So now there have been changes made to the context, and switching back from the other team member's point of view, who has that reference file in their model. To see any updates, they would type in work session, and here the status says that there's an update available, and by clicking Update, then those new elements are reflected in the referenced geometry, in the referenced file. I think an important thing to keep in mind is that the origin, so here we have the the origin XYZ coordinate is going to be the same should be the same in all files, so that everything ports in at the right location. Some additional aspects to having a referenced model in your current file is that you can snap to things in that reference file. So for example, creating a canopy on top of the street, I can snap to that geometry in the reference model and make use of it as though it were in my current file. I can also, let's say that somebody wanted to create a railing around this triangular site, commands can still make use of geometry in the referenced file as though it were in the active file. So here, selecting those edges will still allow you to create geometry even though the reference geometry is, is a file that's being referenced in. Let's say you wanted to bring in a thing that was, entirely, that lived in the other file. For example, the curb, the triangular curb. If I type in explode, you'll notice that that gets copied into my current file, and it maintains that similar layer naming and hierarchy. So let's offload that file just to see more clearly. So I've detached that file, and I can see that this has been brought in on those corresponding layers. So that's an additional handy thing if there's something in that reference file that you want to make use of, and you just want to have that copy into your file. Alright, let's see. So alright. Some other aspects of being able to of working with work sessions is, let me bring that immediate context back. We can toggle between the current file. So what I mean by that, let's take a look here. So the active file currently is this one called Project Pavilion, and provided that the other one is not currently open. So right now I do have this other team member has this file open, but if I close it, let's say they went home for the night, this person could make this the active file. So by clicking on it and clicking here, active, and click yes, and this will flip the state of things such that now I'm in the context file and the pavilion is the one that's being referenced in. I can see that here under the layer states, or the layer manager. I can see that that one's grayed out. So I've kind of flipped the active file. And we'll do that again. And you can see how that kind of automatically toggles which is the active file. Now, one additional benefit is you can save active states for the layers. So here, let's say that this person's wants to have the pavilion with the existing context, and so all the layers should be on. We can just save that as a session down here below and click Save. And this will save the layer states and the reference, which files are referenced in. So actually, I might have done that previously, so I'm going to click Save As to just go through the motions again. And this gets saved as a .rws, RHINO work session file. I'll call it WS, and I'll call it All Layers On, just to make it a little bit different. All Layers On, save. So that has all been saved. Let's now suppose that this person wants to have wants to turn off a lot of this geometry so that they can create a series of diagrams, let's say with only the pavilion and the footprint of the existing buildings. So at this moment, we can save this, click save this as another work session, type in WS, I'll call this one diagram. Alright, and so we can toggle between these two states, and it'll automatically remember which layers are on and off, etc. It's quite handy in that sense. So each team member can save work sessions depending on how they want to see their file and the referenced RHINO files in it. So I'll click open here to take a look and to kind of go back to this moment when all the layers were on. And there, presto, all the layers are on, and that's kind of a handy way to go back and forth between different conditions. And just to see the moment in which, for comparison, when we had the diagram on, the layers off so that we can create diagrams that were called that moment as well. Okay, so lastly, let's take a look at maybe bringing in the entirety of Lower Manhattan, which is a pretty heavy file, but maybe at this moment we're trying to do some overall views of the project in context in the city. So at that moment we can bring in this much larger file. Now that it's in, we can see that we have a lot more geometry, and maybe you can capture some more overall views. Great, that's pretty useful. But we can also try to eliminate or minimize some of this by using the limit reference objects command. And that's going to use a boundary, like a sphere, to kind of decide what to include or exclude from this referenced file of the city. So let's take a look at that. So typing in limit reference model and click apply limit, which is going to use a sphere as a defining boundary to decide how much of this reference geometry to include or exclude. So I'm creating a sphere that's about this big, and basically any object that's fully outside of this sphere will get turned off. So I'll click back here and click, and everything that's fully outside of that gets kind of hidden, and only what's doesn't fall within that will stay within view. So that's a handy way to kind of minimize a little bit of what you want to see in the current model. Okay, and so that's one of the benefits of using work sessions.